Hello, my dear gardeners. Oh my gosh, what a rainy week we have. It's raining cats and dogs for 3.5 days, and there's no way I'm going to get out into the garden today. Maybe in the evening. So I'm answering a question from Cathy, who is the beginner gardener, I think. And she inherited a rose in her garden, and she has no idea what rose it is, and she has a question. I have a novice's questions. How do you tell if the rose inherited in my garden is actually a climber or if it is actually a tall rose bush? It is very tall with long main canes, and I suspect it is a climber, but how do I know for sure? It is not trained or trellised and very overgrown. Perhaps it is just a vigorous, unattended and neglected rose of another type. Well, Cathy, thank you for asking that question. You know what, there's no novice question. We all learn from each other. And the short answer would be, if you don't know what type of rose it is, Cathy, and it is somewhere in between climbing habit and shrub habit, it is up to you what you want that rose to be. But that's a short answer. But the long answer would be, let's look generally at the classification of roses. And people think that rose classification is very strict. The differences between different type of classes is huge. And once rose is in this class, there's no way she can be put in another class. Well, no, because so many rose breeders now are using different roses from different classes of roses to create a new variety, and they not necessarily tell everybody which genes they used. So this rose class identification is very complicated and confusing, especially now when we have so many roses on the market, right? So there are some groups which are just throw-it-all groups where rose doesn't fit into any single group and is just pushed into one group just to classify it somehow. So I want Cathy to know that the distinction between the different rose groups is somewhat not clear. And because we humans, we want always to identify things, right? So we want to put rose into a certain group and variety. So there are roses which can might as well belong to this group, but it is a climber. It can be grown as a shrub. So David Austin, as a result, there is a fairly good amount of roses on his website, which are sold as climbers and as shrubs, believe it or not. And it's up to the gardener how the gardener wants to train that rose. And I addressed that issue, by the way, in the video right here on the example of Lady of Shalott in my garden. So what should Cathy do about it? I would advise for Cathy to observe that rose, not to trim it, and see how it behaves. And if that rose creates, especially during the second part of the summer, somewhere in the middle, these long shoots after the first big flush of flowers, that's what roses do. They focus on creating shoots for next year. So if her rose is creating these long shoots which want to be growing on a support, and Cathy wants to keep that rose that way as a short climber, she can do so. If Cathy doesn't have any space for that rose to be showcased on a support, she can trim those long canes, hide them basically in the canopy, and keep that rose as a shrub. So that's it. Cathy should be patient. She should observe that rose for one growing season and decide for herself. Meanwhile, in my garden, there is this rose, Brother file, and I always tell myself that I'm going to replant that rose because it's struggling there in the corner without any sun, well, partial sun. So last year, that poor rose decided to create this long cane. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this rose is a shrub. She should be as a shrub. So I trimmed it. And that rose right away created the extension on top of that shoot and started growing. So I thought to myself, okay, you would like to be a climber? Let you be a climber. So I made sure that a shoot is bent now horizontally. And it is starting to produce a lot of lateral stems on which my rose would be blooming. So if you would come into my garden and you would see this rose, you would think, oh, a climber. But actually it is a shrub brothergatphile. So a lot of things depend on the gardener with roses. How they are trimmed, short or long, how they are allowed to grow. And of course, there are roses which will never create long shoots. For example, in my garden we have Olivia Austin Rose, and she is 2 years old, never created anything long, and I suspect that she will behave that way. And there are plenty of roses which are definitely staying in the class of short shrubs. So I hope, Cathy, I answered your question, and hopefully I will be able to get out into my garden. My grass is so overgrown right now, but we had such a good long rain that I'm expecting that warm weather is coming in and we are all going to enjoy it, this beautiful growth finally. So be well, happy gardening, and we will see you soon.